You're listening to Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go.
Before we get started, I want to let you guys know that we are doing a free virtual workshop on Tuesday, the 25th. We'll wait and tell you all the details at the end, so make sure you listen all the way through. But just, if you're interested, make sure to listen to the ending because we're going to give you the topic and some more specifics and let you know how you can register.
Yeah. And I mean, hello, if you like free stuff from us, which you should because you're listening to this at this moment, I don't see why you wouldn't be there.
If you want to hang out with us live, well, sort of live.
I mean, it's
virtually live.
We are live and we're going to be there. I don't see how that's not live. It might not be in person, but that's a different story. Very few people hang out with us in person. It's because I'm a homebody.
Called Two Introverts.
That's another alternate episode or alternate podcast title. Okay, so this is another interview with a normal person. One of my favorite things to do.
I will read her official bio in a moment, but do you want to introduce Teanca in terms of how you know her?
Yeah, she was my client a couple years ago, and she has a really interesting story. She actually up and moved to Japan 4 years ago because she was burnt out. And she didn't really know what else to do. So as you do, you just move to Japan. And she worked there for a couple years. And then she had to leave. So she had to come back home without a job lined up. And it took her 2 years to find, really it found her, but she'll get into how it happened, an absolute dream job. Like, couldn't believe it's possible. Is so excited to go to work every day. And this is from someone who really, really wanted to believe that 2 years ago, but just wasn't sure that would ever happen for her. And to see someone go from doubting that something is possible to living it every day is so nice. So it's so gratifying as an observer and as someone who like knows and really loves her. So I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this because I can tell you that even if a job isn't the thing you're hoping and waiting on, you need to hear the conversation we have about how to have faith and now how not to give up when it takes a really long time to get what you want.
I haven't even heard this interview yet, but I can already tell this is going to be one of those podcasts I send many clients back to when they're having moments of doubt that what they really want is possible. So yeah. I'm excited to hear it. Okay, so let's get into Teanca's bio. This is a great bio. We're really setting the stage here.
I know, and it's just so sweet. I feel very gratified by this bio, which you'll understand in a second.
Okay. Imagine drifting along on your journey, stopping every 5 seconds when you see something shiny, to only pick it up and realize it's not what you want. Enter Rachel East and Kristen Walker. When Teanca Shepherd met the two of them, she knew what she didn't want, but couldn't quite clarify what she was searching for. She needed direction and help with combating those gremlins, as the dynamic duo like to call them. Teanca has spent her life determined to leave a legacy and to mentor and uplift those that come across her path. Whether it's by teaching ESL in Japan, championing college students to succeed, or empowering domestic violence survivors along their life quest, she is often humbled by seeing life through the lens of someone else. It wasn't until Teanca experienced a year of no's that when the dream yes came, she fully understood the gravity of not settling. Although this period of time was one of her most vulnerable and gut-wrenching experiences, she can look back confidently to say that she's so glad she waited. If that's not a good teaser, I don't know what is.
I know. I didn't even ask her to do that. And I did not pay her to put my name and your name in there.
It was so sweet.
It's so nice. And I'm so glad that she thinks of us as an integral part of her journey, because I think of her as part of my journey too. All of my clients, I think of that way. So, okay. I think that you guys don't need any more. You're ready to hear this. And we will be back at the end to talk about our live workshop that you can join us at in a few weeks.
I'm ready to hear this too. Let's hear it.
Okay. Hi, Teanca.
Hi, Rachel.
How are you?
I am doing wonderful. It's kind of hot here in Texas, but other than that, it's a wonderful day. How about yourself?
It is also hot because it's Virginia, but it's like living in a swamp. And it's September now, though. So hopefully, I don't know. I love fall. I love dressing for fall. This is probably the 8th time I've said that on this podcast at this point. Mm-hmm. Fall is my favorite season. So I'm very excited. I love back to school energy. And I don't know, recording a podcast on a Saturday, like what we're doing, it does kind of feel like a back to school energy thing. Like we're doing homework together, or we're doing a group project together or something.
Right? It's like this Clarity on Fire project we have to present next week.
I know. I love it. So, okay. I have so many things that I want to ask you and get into you with, but I think first, for the people who are listening to this, I want them to understand where you were, because they heard the introduction, the really beautiful bio you wrote about your journey. They just heard that. So I want to know, and I want them to know, where were you? Not just, I mean, definitely like 2 years ago, but even before that, not even just physically, but mentally and emotionally and physically, where were you?
Okay. For me, I would probably maybe go back about maybe 4 to 5 years.
Okay.
And I was just really in a space of being fatigued and burned out, right? Like I knew my passion of wanting to help people, but I wasn't good at being able to help myself or kind of separate. And so in that space, I was like, I need to get away. I just need to get away. And I felt the best way for me to do that was to move all the way to Japan.
From where? Like obviously from America, but.
Right. From Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So I was living outside of Pittsburgh. And again, I love what I was. And to move from Pittsburgh, and I love what I was doing, but I was like, it's time. It's time. So I moved to Japan. I didn't know anyone. And I thought I knew the language until I got there. And I was like, oh, I don't know anything. This is hard. But spent 4 years there. And then I happened to come across a quiz. I think it was a passion profile quiz. Right. And at that point, I was like, wow, I was just blown away by reading about the messages and just hearing what you and Kristen had to say. I just felt like, okay, this is giving me hope on trying to figure out what I want to do moving forward, right? Like I knew what I didn't want, but just not what to look for that next step. Mm-hmm. And in that process, began looking back at coming to America. And when I came to America, it was a lot of a culture shock, right? I didn't have the time to, in my mind, to get kind of acclimated back to Western ways or to get used to how people do things back in America. So it took me some time to get used to that. And as I was trying to figure out my next steps through employment, I faced a lot of rejection. And so I was trying my hardest not to internalize that. But as you know, sometimes it happens, right? And I began noticing that I was going back into settling, right? Looking at those 4 or 5 jobs and not really finding something that fulfills me. And so in that process, it was like a whole year, right? Of self-discovery, everything of continuing to listen to Clarity on Fire and focus myself to now I'm here at a company that I absolutely love. And it honors everything, everything that we had discussed. Mm-hmm. To give such an example, I'll never forget when I was back in America and, I was kind of told that, oh, you smile a lot and that can come off in your interview as maybe not being assertive or maybe not being serious about an occupation. And then I get to this company and they're just like, oh, we love your smile. We love your presence.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay. You just painted such a lovely arc, and I want to go back and I want to talk about so many different parts of that arc. I have so many questions about that arc, especially because a lot of that journey happened after you and I weren't coaching anymore. And so I wasn't there witnessing it with you. And so I personally have questions about how you were feeling. So I think everyone wants to know, or at least I suspect, because I think a lot of people very much resonate with what Kristen and I say about it's very easy to know what you don't want. It's not always easy to know what you do want. And I've had many, many people affirm that, and you're one of them. So I think people would be curious to know, what did you know that you didn't want? When we go back to your career in Japan, what did you know you didn't want?
Well, for me, I knew that I didn't want to be micromanaged. And I think that's something that can occur in any job, particularly being in a different country where you're still learning to speak the language. You're learning the ins and outs of a business that's completely different than an American business. So really, that was important, not being micromanaged, being able to be creative and free. I've always felt like I was like this free spirit. And that wasn't allowed to be so. And so those are things that I started noticing. Like when I would come and I was frustrated when I would come home from work, or I would talk to someone else and I would hear about their frustration. And it was a similarity of I know I don't want to be micromanaged. I know that I don't want my ideas to be stifled. I know that I don't want to just do one thing over and over again. I wanted something different, something unique. Right.
Mm-hmm. So. And I think that what a lot of people don't always realize is that it's not necessarily enough to, and we do this in coaching, obviously, we go really deep into what you don't want. And that is really helpful in clarifying what you do want, because if you don't want to be micromanaged, it's pretty clear you value some level of autonomy and freedom. And I know that you came to realize just how much you value freedom through that work. But I think that what people don't often realize is that you get in your own way a lot. And so it's not enough to know what you do want. You also have to get clear on, well, how am I getting in my own way and almost maybe preventing myself from going after the things that I do want? Or maybe there are things I want that I don't even believe are possible. And so I'm curious what you would say about those things. How are you getting in your own way? Or what did you believe was and wasn't possible for you at that point in your life?
Absolutely. One of the things, especially when we go back to micromanaging, I got in my own way because I was constantly trying to seek approval. I was constantly asking or second guessing myself in a professional setting as far as, should I do this particular project like this, or where should I do that? And I think there's a difference between asking for the sake of instruction versus asking for the sake of approval or for the need of approval, to constantly have that, you're doing a good job, you're doing this, you're doing that. Mm-hmm. And I got in my own way because of that, as far as just even having the freedom to be able to be creative. I was passive in sharing my ideas. And so I don't think I necessarily needed to be aggressive, but I wasn't assertive. Mm-hmm. So if I would say idea and then no one would reply back, and then a couple of seconds later, someone would share this similar idea and it was welcome. I wasn't assertive initially, if that makes sense. I didn't say, well, hey, why don't we do this? And this is why X, Y, and Z, I think it will be beneficial, instead of kind of cowering back and just soft-spokenly saying it,
Yeah. I think a lot of people resonate with that. I think that, it's funny aside that the episode we did about people pleasing is by far the most listened to episode of the podcast we've done. And so I think a lot of people resonate with the fear of speaking up, the fear of being assertive, and that somehow being assertive means you're being rude, or that you shouldn't rock the boat because confrontation is to be avoided at all costs. And I actually remember that one of the homework assignments I gave you, and I think this really helped you, was that you had to keep a log of all the times that you spoke up and expressed yourself. Do you remember doing that?
Yes. I do because, and it was interesting because I'll never forget either being in the classroom and remembering, oh, wait a minute, I just said this that was kind of passive, or in a meeting, like, oh, why did I second guess myself, or why am I doubting myself in this space? And it really helped me to start pinpointing that and realizing, one, not to necessarily beat myself up, but just to be cognizant of what I'm saying to myself, what I'm saying about myself, and how often I'm doing it. So.
Totally. And I think that sometimes in order to get over something that feels like such a deeply ingrained fear, and I think that this is one of those things, because it's so wired into our culture, often the people pleasing and the seeking approval and the not speaking up and the being as accommodating and nice as you possibly can. When you're trying to get over something that's so deeply ingrained, it really does help to like have to write it down or have to log it, because like you said, at first, it's like you have to realize when it's happening so that you can go about changing it. It's often like when you listen back to a podcast and you realize how many times you say or like. In the moment, you don't realize that you're doing it. And so you have to bring a certain level of consciousness and cognizance to your patterns so that you can even attempt to change them. And I think that having to do that like really made you realize how often you had the opportunity to choose a different way to behave and to speak up. And
yes,
I'm curious, I know at first it probably was really scary to speak up and to express yourself and to not be so passive. But I'm wondering, how quickly did it become normal for you?
Well, and it's funny because I think that it became normal for me kind of fairly quickly, because I started telling myself, whereas I think before I would be like, well, does anybody really want to listen to my ideas? I'm not sure. And in my mind, I was telling myself, when I, started logging everything down, I was telling myself, wait a minute, if I don't share, it could be something that maybe hurts the students, as far as ideas or something, or hurts my company that I'm working for. And I just kept saying, I owe it to myself to be authentic. I owe it to myself and my community to say what I think and what I feel that can be beneficial to them. And so at first it was like, and I remember telling you and talking to you about that, I was like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. But after a while, it started getting better, and I do feel like, had I not been through that, it would have been very difficult when I was in interviews, when I'm interviews for my dream company, talking about myself in a way of how I can help that business grow, or bring people there. Yeah.
Yeah, so true. I think something that this makes so much sense when you look at it from a slightly different perspective. Like when people go to the gym, we don't expect to, let's just say you're trying to train for a marathon. You don't expect to go to the gym and run 26 miles on the treadmill the first day. Or you don't expect to go from having the thought of, I want to get in shape, to being in shape the next day. It doesn't happen like that. But often when we realize, I don't want this job, I want something else. Maybe you do or don't know exactly what that is, but you have to get to the point where you are a fit for what you want. And that doesn't necessarily, actually, it very rarely has anything to do with your work experience or your technical qualifications. It has to do with your mental, emotional fitness. I think that if you're looking for a dream job, you have to become the person who's qualified in a deeper way to hold on to that thing. So if you're not treating yourself well, or if you're allowing people to walk all over you, or if you're not speaking up, or if you're not expressing yourself, it's very unlikely that a dream job, like what we call a 9 or 10 out of 10, is going to stick and land with you, because you're not yet at the point where you're capable of holding on to something that awesome, because you haven't yet kind of stepped into your own awesomeness, to sound kind of corny. But that's really what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's funny because if I would have, even if I would have heard that, it still would have been hard for me to process that a year ago, right? Because I'm just like, but you have to understand, I'm ready for the dream job now.
I know. Oh, man.
Right?
I know. I totally have so many questions just about that. But yes.
Right? And now to be able to say, but had I not went through that, had those previous experiences not shaped me, have I not taken time to log in how I was feeling, had I not learned to assert myself, had I not done X, Y, and Z, not only do I think I wouldn't have gotten where I am with this company, but I don't think that I would have appreciated it as much as I do.
That is so true. And I completely feel you on but I feel like I am qualified for what I want now. Why do I need to go through more struggle? Why do I need to bench press more weight? I feel like I've already picked up and put down so much weight here. But you're right that there is a level of fitness, and that's, in quotation marks, fitness, that you have to be at in order to achieve and attain that thing. And without the contrasting experience of not getting what you want doesn't feel all that great. And so it feels like really satisfying when you know you've really worked for something, and when you know that you've become the person you need to be in order to hold on to that thing. That's really satisfying. So I want to talk to you about that. But I want to spend a few minutes talking about what you realized that you wanted out of a job. And because you were telling me before we started recording that there was this list of non-negotiables, things that you weren't willing to settle on or compromise, and that these were things you absolutely wanted to get out of your next job. And really, there was only one thing on this list that you haven't yet gotten, but that you're hopeful that you will get. And it hasn't necessarily negatively impacted your experience. So can I share some of those things? Can we talk about some of those things?
Yes, of course. Let's do that.
Okay. So you wanted somewhere that allowed for introverted and extroverted sides of you. So you wanted to have the ability to socialize, but also retreat and not have to constantly be on the whole day. Professional development. So a place that invests in your growth. Trust. This is so key. A leader or mentor who gives you the space to work in your own way without micromanaging you. Travel. Flexibility. The ability to, do work throughout the week in the time it actually takes to do it. Balance, not being expected to take work home all the time and having the ability to have work-life balance. And you also made a good point about just because I don't have kids doesn't mean I should have to work longer because someone else does have kids and they, have to go pick up theirs,
Right.
Creativity and an environment that's very encouraging of it and not one that is going to shut it down. And mentorship. So someone who really wants to get to know you and wants to be able to help you be the best version of yourself so that you can expand. That was sort of like a summary version of the things, like the core kind of pillars that you were looking for. So as you hear that back, any reflections you have about hearing that list?
Yes. And there's quite a few. So first, looking at the one with the introverted and extroverted sides. For me, I've always came up, I think, if I did the Myers-Briggs, I was getting ENFP. And I always tell people, it's funny that I get the extroverted because I'm really kind of introverted, if you look at it. But with my current position, not only am I able to work kind of together on teams, so there's small teams, there's big teams that I can interact with. We also have the ability to kind of float in our own building. So not only can we stay on our floor, we can go on to another floor, we can work at a coffee shop. They even have nap rooms. So if we just, if we need to take a break or play a video game or something, we have an opportunity to step away, which kind of goes into that creativity, right? Step away, reflect, breathe, and then come back and not only, again, just bring our true selves, but also our ideas that maybe we had to formulate and come up with without being bogged down. And I would say one of the biggest things, especially professional development and mentorship, kind of go hand in hand with me. When I first started, I just felt this sense of love and authenticity from my bosses, as well as the people on my particular, in my particular department and division. Everyone wants to see me succeed. I'm not used to that, right?
Wow.
I'm just not used to that. Not that I didn't have that particular aspect in a different way at other companies, just never on this level and never with this much intensity that people are saying, I want to see you grow. How can I help you do that? Or I want to see you, like if you see this problem and you come up with an idea, a solution, run with it, right? And so part of that for me is, that's amazing. It's also a little scary, to be honest, because it's always been kind of comforting to retreat a little bit, right? Like if you have an idea and someone doesn't hear it, then you can kind of retreat and be like, oh, well, it's okay. I don't have to really worry about them hearing it and wanting to take it on. Whereas in this space, people want to take on those ideas. They want to see you. So it's almost like you have to continue to step outside of your comfort zone of being shy about your ideas and making sure they're assertive, but also believing in yourself that you can tackle the project, and again, that's not something I was used to doing.
I mean, I think a lot of people are going to hear this and say, is this for real? This feels like such a dream job. And you're like, it is, but it's also right. Real. And so, okay, so I think this is really like the meat of what I wanted to talk to you about. And so I'm really excited and I just have so many different thoughts, but just for people to understand, context-wise, you and I started coaching 2 years ago, September 2016. And we didn't coach for that long. We were only coaching for a few months, like a couple months. And you just started this job in July of 2018. So
yes.
It took you from the time you and I started working together to the time you started this dream job, 2 years went by. And in that time, you moved back from Japan and you had a series of bridge jobs. So I want to talk about that span of your life. Like we talked about before you moved that, and this is a lesson I think is so important for a lot of people to understand. You were sort of on a time crunch. You had to, it was time for you to move back from Japan and you couldn't stay because of obviously like immigration reasons. You couldn't just stay indefinitely. So you had to move back. And a lot of the time, what will happen is people will, because they're under a time crunch, whether they quit their job and they're running out of money and they need a new job, or because they're on a deadline like you were, they get kind of desperate and antsy. And they're like, I need to find a job ASAP right now. And I completely understand that because you need to be able to provide for yourself and take care of your basic human needs. But it's often not the right energy to be searching for a dream job because desperation and dream job don't really go together. It's exactly like dating. If you are desperate, you are very likely not going to end up with a super high quality person. You're going to end up with a person who matches that sort of energy. So someone who's either also desperate or someone who's like emotionally avoidant and ghosts you after 6 weeks. It's not going to end up being healthy. So in that state, I always say, I mean, we tend to focus on finding a bridge job because I think it's really helpful to get you like the physical and like financial stability that you need, but that also allows you the mental space and freedom to focus on the long term of finding that dream job. So you came back from Japan with the intention of, I think, finding a bridge job. And of course, if a dream job came along, that would have been great. But you were looking for something that could meet your basic needs while you continued your search. So how did that process go for you?
Well, for me, that process was, it was pretty tricky because, again, I wanted to find something that would not only pay my bills, but I wanted it to have meaning and have something that I could connect to on a level. And, I'm laughing because, again, I can look back but it was still a lot of pain at that time. Even the bridge jobs were hard to get, where I was thinking, I just want to be able to pay my bills. And I was getting told, you're too overqualified or you don't meet the qualifications, although I had done the job previously, or like I was just getting faced with rejection after rejection after rejection. And sometimes it wasn't, you would hear about it, they would ghost you. Almost like you said too, like dating, so right? Like, sometimes employment, they'll just ghost you. And it was difficult. For me, I was like, but I don't understand why. And I thought that I came back with this wonderful international experience. And then to hear that it wasn't valued in the way that I thought that it should be was heartbreaking. It really was. And I had a couple of stints of some brisk jobs, whether I was like teaching English online to students in China, or I was just working for different companies. And I ended up settling on a nonprofit, which ended up being that in between. And that person was phenomenal. She was just like, hey, I know you're overqualified, but I'm going to put you in this space because we can both benefit from your knowledge as well as what we have to offer. And we're able to provide you money to pay your bills, right? Mm-hmm. And I would probably say like she was one of my biggest supporters in this process of applying to this dream company. Mm. So she was constantly like, how did it go? How did the interview go? Like, do you need anything? And I think that that's something that can be said too. Like, and again, I can't speak for everyone. I can speak for every brisk job. I think that I was fortunate with mine, the fact that my boss wanted to see me succeed. She wanted to see me move on to what was next and didn't try to hinder me because of that. So
that is a really nice blessing. And you're right. I think it's kind of rare to have a, right. but here's what I will say. I think that that's a really good lesson in being honest and transparent. It doesn't sound like you were trying to hide the fact that this isn't what you wanted to do forever. And I think a lot of people make assumptions, perhaps unnecessarily, on behalf of other people that I can't tell them the truth and that I can't be clear about my intentions and also get a job. And while, of course, that's true in a lot of cases, it wasn't true in this case. And it's a good lesson in that sometimes you actually can be honest and have people support you anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's just a matter of what you were saying too, just discovering or trying to be able to kind of discern who to share the information with and who not to. Right. But one of the things that was interesting to me, mine was grant funded. Like that bridge job was a grant funded position that wasn't going to last longer than May.
Okay.
And it was so interesting because it's like, it's at the end of May and I'm like, my boss at that time was like, oh, have you found something yet? And I'm like, no. She was like, okay, I'm going to extend it to June. And she just kept extending and extending and extending until I could connect with where I am now. And I think that's, like you said too, that's such a blessing, but also understanding that it's okay. It's okay that, it's kind of hard for me to put it in words. I think that it's okay not being aware that that's not going to be what you want. And I think for me, sometimes in the past, I have entered into bridge jobs not knowing that that was going to be a bridge job. Like in my mind, I was like, this is going to be a forever job. I'm going to retire from here. And I've now gotten comfortable with saying sometimes that's the way this works. Sometimes you're only there for so long, and what can I give and what can I also learn in the process?
I love that. And it's true. Everything is really just for now, and nothing has to be forever. And it doesn't make it any less valuable of an experience to have.
Right.
And so, okay, keeping the faith is a really, really hard thing to do. But somehow you managed to do it. And I am very impressed by that. And I know it wasn't easy because it never is. I mean, 2 years of having bridge jobs, looking for a dream job, also struggling to even find a bridge job. I think what a lot of people would assume in that state is if I can't find a bridge job, how the hell am I supposed to find a dream job? Like, It just seems so impossible. And I'm sure like anyone who really wants something and it just isn't happening it gets so easy to believe that it's never going to happen and that you were silly for even expecting it to happen in the first place. So how in the world did you keep your faith like throughout this process? And what was that? And I know you had many moments of doubt. So what was that like?
It was very hard, to be honest. I'm going to be as vulnerable as possible and say that there are plenty of times where I cried. I would talk to my family and I would just break down because it was one of those things like I couldn't imagine that I wouldn't be able to find something. Not that it wouldn't take time, but that it would take this long. And then having to talk with like family and friends that would constantly encourage me. And I'm the type of person that sometimes you can look at me and not tell what's going on. Yeah. But once I feel like I'm in a safe space, then I can just kind of like share everything. And it was hard. And I really have to say, it was a day by day method for me. Like I had to take every day by itself. And some days were great where I was just like, oh, I'm going to find this amazing job. I'm going to connect. It's going to be awesome. But there were also days where it was hard. And so something also I wanted to say with that part, that although there were times that I was hearing no's, there were times that I had to give no's.
Yeah.
And that was difficult because I was like, no, like this is where I should be. I should do this. But something either occurred, like family life situation, or something within me was like, you have to say no.
Yeah.
And that was hard, right? Like, what do you mean I have to say no? Like I need to take whatever comes my way. What do you mean I need to say no? Or what do you mean that this particular situation happened that I can't take this opportunity? But if I had did that, I wouldn't be where I am now. And I feel like for me, if I hadn't fallen the way that I fell and going through everything and being sad and being depressed and all those, all those things that you don't like to talk about, right? But you should.
Yeah.
I don't think I would be here now. I don't think that I wouldn't appreciate it the way that I do. I wouldn't be able to say, oh, when someone told me that it's going to happen, just wait. Now I can say me too. That happened to me. And I can also say as well, and I can agree, like, yes, you should wait. Don't give up.
This is like a balm to my spirit and to, I think, a lot of people's spirits who will be listening to this. This is why I want to talk to normal people, because it's so easy to talk to sort of experts, quote unquote, and it's harder to relate to their journey of like extreme success sometimes, or just, it seems like they're on a pedestal. But when I can sit down and talk to you, who is a very awesome, but very also normal person who's saying, yeah, I didn't believe every day that what I wanted was possible, but I kept getting up and assuming that it would work out. And I didn't have to actually believe it every single day, because a lot of times I had a lot of doubt, and a lot of times I broke down crying, and I was probably sometimes almost buried under the weight of the fear and the grief of that. But even on like the worst kind of days, I still believe maybe sometimes it's only 51% to 49%, but sometimes you just need like a little bit more belief that what you want is possible than not. And that was enough. Yes. And that it was worth waiting for, because now you can actually look back and say, yeah, 9s and 10s exist. They're not unicorns. It feels like that though, right? It feels like, It feels like you're searching for this absolute unicorn. And what I tend to tell people who are in this process of like having to have faith is that faith is something that you can't really have without doubt. And I think that faith is one of the most important things that you're supposed to learn how to have as a human. Because if you never doubt that things are going to work out for you, if you never are forced to step out into the unknown without any idea of what's going to happen or where your path is going to go, you don't become a resilient person. You don't have much of an opportunity to develop your character and to develop your inner strength and your inner self-trust and your fortitude, all of which are things that you absolutely developed a lot of over the past 2 years, and that I know are going to serve you for the rest of your life. And you will need to draw on again in other moments of your life when you're going to need a lot of faith, because you can't see how things are going to work out. So this is hard, and I'm so, so proud of you. And I'm just so happy to hear that, like, here you are as a success story, that this is something that other people can expect to happen to them if they're willing to have that internal fortitude and wait it out the way that you waited it out. And so, okay, how did the dream job come along? Because I know a lot of people are probably very curious about that. Like, did you find it? Did you stumble across it online? Did they find you? Like, how did it actually happen? The day that the dream job and you met, How did that story go?
So it's interesting, right? It ended up being that someone I knew had gotten a job with this particular company a year ago. And we just talked about their experiences. And even then, in my mind, I was like, oh, that's not a company for me. Like, they wouldn't look at me like that. They wouldn't consider me like that. Like, this is just awesome. Like, she got blessed, but, that might not necessarily be for me, right? Because then I wasn't ready.
Right.
Well, it ended up that a recruiter reached out to me on my LinkedIn account and was like, hey, are you interested in this particular company? And I was like, for real? Like, seriously? Right? Like, you're like, do I need to pinch myself? Because seriously? So it was one of those things that she reached out to me, and then over a course of some months, we talked about the company. We talked about the position. We talked about like kind of who I was as a person at my core and how I felt that would resonate with the company that I was trying to go work for. And over that span of time, I had a multitude of interviews. So much so I was like, woo. Mm-hmm. And throughout that process, it was interesting because through every interview, I always said, this is not an interview, this is a conversation. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Mm-hmm. And because I wanted it to be that if this was for me, if this was my dream job, that they needed to see me in all of who I am, as well as for me to see them. And it was scary, right? Because this is a big leap. One, this is like a major big company. And then two, you're like, okay, I should just do it. Like, there's a part of you, right? That gremlin's like, just do what you need to do to get it. And then the authentic part of me is like, no, you need to be yourself. You need to smile. You need to laugh. You need to joke a little bit. Like, you really need to show who you are. So that way they know what you're getting and you no longer feel like you have to silence that part of yourself anymore.
Yes, 100%. Amen. This is actually another act of faith that a lot of people struggle with, and that I cannot emphasize enough is so important for you to do and to sort of sit with the discomfort of. And that is, especially when it feels high stakes and when you feel like, I really want this thing. Who do you need me to be in order for me to get this job? It's so tempting. And, it's a thing people do even when they're not even sure they want a job. They're again, that sort of innate desire to be approved of allows people to sort of, in an interview, try to mold and shape and shift and be what the person wants them to be, or at least they try to be what they think that person wants them to be in order to impress them and get the job. But if you do that and you get hired, you're getting hired for whatever weird person you were pretending to be, not yourself. And so that right there's a values clash and there's a misalignment, and it's very likely not going to be satisfying for you because you can't totally be yourself. This was really hard because you really wanted this job. And, a year ago you had said, well, it'd be nice if they were ever interested in me, but I don't think I'm enough for that. And so here you are, and they're saying, hey, we think you might actually be a good fit for this. And your hopes are probably through the roof. And you're having to have conversation after conversation with people and jump through so many hoops. And it would have been so easy at any time during that hoop jumping process for you to sort of back away or mold to what you thought they wanted to hear, and you didn't do it, and you got hired. And that is maybe one of the best feelings of all time, is when someone wants you exactly as you are. Not because you pretended to be something, not because you kind of like over-exaggerated on your online dating profile or on your resume, but because you just were completely yourself and you were unapologetic about it. And they said, this is exactly who we want. That makes a dream job, I think. It's not just about what you're doing. It's about who you get to be when you're doing it. And there's nothing more satisfying than just getting to be yourself.
Absolutely. And so much so that it feels good when I go into work every morning. Don't get me wrong, I love sleeping in bed. But once I'm up and at it, then actually being there, it feels good. It feels good to be around people who are not necessarily that they're like-minded, but they are different and they're authentic in who they are.
Yeah.
And to embrace that and have people embrace that about you, it's I can't even explain it. It's like a cloud nine feeling.
Yeah.
That you're just like, why have I not felt this way ever in my life?
And you know what's so ironic about that is that for most of your life, you were seeking approval and you never felt that level of acceptance, even though you were probably more aligned with people in their way of thinking and more aligned with them in your behavior because you were trying to be what they wanted you to be. And you still never experienced that approval because you weren't being yourself. Approval and acceptance is when someone actually accepts you as you are. And now you just owning your differences and speaking up and having opinions and not being passive. Now you feel more accepted than ever, which should be a really great piece of evidence for all of those like kind of, reformed people pleasers out there.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So as we kind of start to wrap our conversation up, and I can't believe, again, I could talk to you forever, but I really want you to what would you say to someone or yourself who just began that journey like the 2 years ago, who's just now having to exert a ton of faith and who has no light at the end of the tunnel because they don't know when it's going to end? They think it could last. They're hoping it only lasts a couple months, but they might be heartbroken to hear that it could last years. And what would you say to that person from where you are now?
Well, for me, what I would say to that person, or even to myself, I would be honest and I would say, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. It's not going to feel good. And there may be days that you're okay and days that you're not okay. And guess what? That's okay. And to continue that through this process, learning about yourself, to continue trying and testing the waters, because when the time comes for you to jump in, you'll know more about who you are and you won't be afraid or ashamed of that. You won't be afraid to use your voice. You won't be afraid or ashamed to be authentically who you are. And it's funny because I have that tattooed on my wrist, right? It says like, be authentic, to always remind me to be authentic. But I would want to say, again, to continue to love on yourself and to continue to allow people to love on you as well, because you're going to need it. I always say, like, no man is an island, right? Like, we need each other. And don't be afraid to say, I need you, or to be open when someone says that to you, that they need you, right? And not in this kind of, I don't know how to word it, but like this bad dependence, but in this way of uplifting each other, supporting each other, wanting to see each other thrive and be successful. And then the cliche, I know it's cliche. And honestly, if I heard this, I'd be like, really, really? But the whole, like, don't give up, right? It's so cliche. It's so cliche, but it's true. It's true. And if you've got to tell yourself that in the mirror every morning, every evening, then you do it. You do it.
I think that when people say don't give up, I think what people hear is I'm never allowed to like struggle or have a bad day and I'm always supposed to be optimistic, which is, I just want to remind people, is not what you're saying.
Right.
I think you're allowed to have, like, you're allowed to give up 1,000,000 times in like small ways. Like on a daily basis, you're going to give up like 25 times. But real giving up is just saying, never mind, this is never going to work. I'm just going to stay in this awful job and I'm not even going to look for something better. Or I'm just going to marry this person I'm not that excited about because I need to have kids and I'm afraid it'll never happen. Real giving up is, I'm afraid that what I want is just not possible. So I'm going to just go ahead and pretend that it's not and settle for an existence that I'm not excited about. And it's okay if you have those thoughts. It's okay if you find yourself on the floor broken into little pieces often about how upset you are and how scared you are that what you want isn't possible. But not giving up just means that eventually you sigh and you stand back up and you go, all right, I guess I'll keep going now. it doesn't have to be excited. It doesn't even have to be that optimistic every day. It's just a very, very stubborn refusal to totally give in to the belief that life can't be better. Like, that counts. That counts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think it goes back to your point when you said about being resilient and not being like just, I think that there's going to be things like you're saying too, you're going to give up like, okay, like this particular day was not a good day. I just don't want to deal with this particular day, but not giving up your dream of what you're saying or not settling for something that doesn't resonate with who you are. Yeah, all I can say is absolutely to that.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is that if you refuse to give up on the idea that a 9 or 10 exists, eventually you will find it. I really think that the only time that people end up with a 7 or an 8 or a 6 or a 4 or whatever, it's because they just didn't wait it out the 9 or 10 long enough. And I know it's hard because sometimes it literally takes years. And the longer it goes, sometimes the easier it is to doubt whether what you want is possible. But the reason I wanted to talk to you so much after you sent me an update about starting your new job was because you ended that email to me saying, and I'm so glad that I waited. And that's something people need to hear, is that even after years, you can still get what you want and that you can actually be glad that you had to wait years for something in hindsight, which is kind of mind-blowing when you're in the middle of that journey.
Right.
So I just want to thank you so much for being such an inspiration to me and to everyone who's listening to this. And I'm just like over the moon excited for you that you have this dream job. And I know you're going to do fabulous things and that you get to be yourself at work is just a dream. And I hope that you will absolutely keep me posted as you go through this journey. Yes. And I just want to give you a big hug, but I can't. So I'm giving you a big virtual hug right now.
Oh, thank you. And I'm giving one back.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So, as we promised at the beginning of this episode, we will now tell you about our free workshop. So you can join us on Tuesday, the 25th.
I like how you're telling them that we're going to tell them. We could have just started telling them.
Well, I wanted to they just got out of this great interview. I wanted to.
Okay, we don't need to like nurture them into this. We can just tell them that it's on Tuesday the 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And obviously, well, maybe not obviously, there will be a replay video. There always is. Though we usually have it expire after a certain amount of time. So just keep that in mind.
That's because we know how people work, including ourselves, which is that you might have the best of intentions to listen, but if we don't have an expiration date, it'll just sit in your inbox forever. So this is to help you decide, yes, I want to do this, and I'm going to make it a priority.
It's called How to Figure Out What to Do with Your Life in 2 Steps. And as I'm going to say multiple times between now and the time this live hangout actually happens, that is oversimplifying the matter, okay? Never believe clickbait. Never believe something that sounds like clickbait. So I'm not trying to clickbait you. I just know that I only have an hour and I can't tell you everything you need to know, but I can give you 2 very clear steps to start with to help you figure out what the hell to do with your life.
Plus, if we explained it in full in the title would be a paragraph long. So this is just being succinct.
Take every minute of the podcast you've listened to up until now, not just this one, all of the other ones you've listened to. And that isn't even enough for me to get all of my thoughts out, as you can tell, because we keep publishing new thoughts. So obviously the PPV is a pretty comprehensive experience where we get into more of those steps. And we are having this live hangout on the day we are opening enrollment to the PPVE. That's not a coincidence. It's a good place if you're considering joining us for that program for you to come hang out with us and hear us talk about these 2, big steps we want you to understand when it comes to figuring out what to do with your life. And if that resonates with you, then you might be a really good candidate for joining us for PPVE.
Because in the PPVE, we're going to take you through several more very clear steps to help you go from, I don't know what I want to do with my life, to, okay, I have a better sense of who I am, what I want, and how to start going after it. So we're going to give you some beginner opening steps in the workshop, which might be exactly what you need. That might just be the little tweak you need to get clear on where you're going. But for some of you, you're going to be like, I want more of this, in which case we will tell you more about our program. So if you would like to register for the workshop, we're going to have a link in the episode description. So make sure that you sign up between now and the 25th. And even if you can't join us live, if it's the middle of the workday or you've got something going on that day, still make sure that you register, because we're going to only be sending the recording out to people who have registered. So if you want the recording, you're going to want to make sure you put your name in.
That's it. That's all you need to know.
Yep.
Episode description is where you will find a link to that. Okay.
We will see you again on Tuesday for a blog, which will be mine.
Sure. Great. Who knows what it'll be about?
I don't know yet, but you'll find out.
All right. See you then.
Bye.